Moving on the show now, as the federal government plans the disbursement of a World Bank loan of $800 million as post-petroleum subsidy palliative, experts have faulted this approach, insisting that it will not have the desired effect on the common citizens. One of these experts was on our show on Wednesday, 12th of April. That was the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Yusuf asked government to put in place genuine palliatives that will reduce the effect of subsidy removal on the people, and the planned palliatives should be segmented to have the desired effect. From the $800 million loan, it's expected that 50 million Nigerians living below the poverty line will benefit 5,000 naira each monthly for 12 months to cushion the planned subsidy removal effect. Well, joining me to assess the impact of this, what it means, and the attendant consequences on the financial system, he is the co-founder, Chief Executive Officer at Budget Nigeria, Mr. Seun Onigbinde. It's good to see you, Seun. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
It's a pleasure being here, Tolu. I'm excited to be here today. Yes.
Seun, let's start with what this looks like at the moment. Like the government, the incoming administration needs to bite the bullet. Everyone is saying subsidy must go. Overstayed a shelf life. A lot of issues around subsidy. Now, in your terms or in your thoughts, what do you think about subsidy removal? I am one of the advocates of face-by-face removal because of the pressure that it will have on the masses. But you should understand this more than I do.
Thank you very much. And I think I've also had conflicted positions over subsidy removal. At some point, I was not for it. At some point, I was for a phased removal. At some point, I'm for a total removal. But I think at this point, I am for a total removal of fuel subsidy. And the reasons are that Nigeria can no longer afford fuel subsidy. The alternative cost for what subsidy could have been used for is huge. For example, we're spending close to 2 to 4 trillion naira every year in subsidizing fuel. And we know that volumes are exaggerated. We know that a significant chunk of that volume goes across our borders. We also know that there's a whole lot of waste in that environment. And we've gone from a point where we spend far on fuel subsidy to a point where we spend excess good account savings on subsidy, to a point where we will even borrow to even subsidize fuel. At this point, it just shows that the public finance metrics are no longer adding up. And we don't have a choice than just to remove it because Nigeria just simply can't afford it. Now, if we can afford it, what do we do differently? How do we build a palliative structure around it? And that's the $800 million fund loan, because a lot of people call it grant. It's not a grant. The World Bank is a bank for a reason. You know, it was an $800 million loan that is advanced to Nigeria. I think payment is staggered, starts from 2027 to 2051. The interest rate is very, very low. But it's still a loan. Nigeria would have to pay back at some point. Now, if we are going to pay back that amount of fund, we have to ask ourselves for what? $800 million is less than 400 billion naira, you know. And at the end of the day, how much you want to give 400 billion naira to how many people, you know, or even if you remove the management cost is around $750 million. You know, we want to give $750 million, around maybe 300 billion. What would that do to around? We say we have 133 million Nigerians in multidimensional poverty that might possibly be bearing the brunt of subsidy. In my own view, I think it's just an FX liquidity play. Nigeria just found an opportunity to have 800 million extra into its external reserves, into a federal government, maybe multilateral or commitment, and they were able to grab $800 million from the World Bank. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to give $800 to people on the streets. You're still going to monetize this money to Naira and give it to people. My own play is that this is not the right decision for what we should have borrowed funds for. We can do much more better than this. If you want to do palliative for the poor or the vulnerable, you have to start from 3 things. 1, we have to start from food. Food is the biggest cost driver for the poor in Nigeria. People spend so much on food. How do you make sure that food can be more accessible, can be cheaper? It's much more sensible for us to invest effectively in that. Second, we also need to now look at public transport systems, either interstate, either intrastate, to make sure that for those who might not be able to afford the more expensive private transport system, are able to use the public transport system, within an efficient, strict framework to be able to reach where they want to be. And third is to build a social contract through a national identity system out of here. We should be able to know who is poor in Nigeria, because we also depend on the register of the World Bank and say this is who is poor, or the register of the federal government and say this is who is poor. To be honest with you, I've heard a lot of people will interrogate that register and they will find out that a lot of Nigerians that do not fit into the category of being poor will be on that register because they're able to peddle some level of influence. We need to be methodical in Nigeria, and the only way we can be methodical is build a single national identity data system that is driven by a social contract, and where people even are obliged to declare incomes, to file tax, no matter how small, no matter how little, so they can qualify for such opportunities. So I think that's where we should sit and where should. And I made this case 2 years ago that if you want to remove subsidy, it is a good opportunity to use that to build a social welfare program that is founded on a social contract and also a national identity system.
They show the vulnerable persons is also something that has generated reactions. Who are the vulnerable ones? How do we identify them? Remember, we've had policies like the trader money, market money before now, and many will say, what really was the impact of all of these policies? So what do you also think about the process of identifying this set of people?
It's not, I mean, you could put a lot of partners, development partners, World Bank, every of these there, but I don't think this is not how it works anywhere. And we must do things and do things properly. If this is not how it works anywhere, in the US, I mean, everywhere you have a structure of what qualifies you to be poor, in some sort of way. And if you're poor, it kind of benefits, because we need to be honest with ourselves. The government exists for the welfare and security for the people. And what we call welfare is primarily social protection of the poorest and the most vulnerable. But I've read through their methodology. They go into communities, they do like a survey to ascertain who are the poorest, and those kind of people get thrown into register. But that is not comprehensive enough. Someone can live in Lagos, right inside Lekki, and still be very, very poor. So how do you capture that kind of environment? How do you capture even poor people in semi-urban areas if you deeply dive only on rural communities? So those are the questions you need to bring to the table. We must be a country that can count ourselves. We must be a country that can have a proper identity. And we must be a country that must be able to ascertain income levels at every point and incentivize that, even for people to come forward with that. We're having a census figure. The money we're spending on census is around 869 billion naira. Something I can't even fathom in my head, that mathematically doesn't make sense to me. And we could have used all of that money to build a proper national digital identity system. Everybody in the country gets what you call in the US a social security number, or gets a national insurance number, gets a NIN. Technically, everybody gets a NIN as a Nigerian. And that situation will start profiling on different metrics, and we can be able to intervene much more effectively. I don't think the approach we have right now is comprehensive and is equitable as it should be in any way. Yeah.
Let's move to understanding other issues that we face around the oil and gas industry. Basically, it's the downstream, and many will tell you that we need investment in the downstream. We need to open up the downstream. Many are even happy that this deregulation would work. But let's look at the volume of consumption. Some say if we address the corruption around subsidy, we could have a headway. So what do you think about our level of consumption, the movement of products outside our countries? Because we know that products from Nigeria are being sold in places like Cotonou and other closer countries to Nigeria. So what do you think about checking all of these excesses before biting this bullet?
I think it's just about allowing the market to regulate itself. The subsidy thing is a very it's a nice geese. It's a golden goose. A lot of people they find it very, very exciting. They lavish, because you import volumes, you exaggerate volumes, and volumes could be out of the country. We still pay subsidy on things like that. Someone can decide there can be 5 people in a house, and each of them drive cars to the office. They will not even decide to even explore, ride sharing and all of that fuel is run on subsidy. You could live in a big house and run multiple petrol generators, and all of that is subsidized also by the government and all of that. So we were able to get Nigerians to make adjustment to energy efficiency by the time the first subsidy is removed, because one, the price will be high. There's no way, let's not sugarcoat it. There is no way we're going to buy fuel at pump price less than 400 to between 400, at least, or 400 to 500 naira per liter. And I mean, at least it can go as high as 600, 700, 800, depending on even exchange rates decision making, if they choose to pursue parity in the exchange rate market. That can even make things much more worse for those who are importing. Maybe over time, when Mr. Dangote's refinery comes on stream, you can have a bit of reduction. And I don't want Nigerians to miss the point, thinking that Dangote refinery mechanism would bring down the price of fuel significantly. No, the biggest cost in fuel in the pump, in the fuel bit sold at the pump, is the cost of crude. So if the cost of crude is high, the price which you buy fuel at the pump would be high. So I mean, also the Nigerians need to be educated about that, so that we don't think this will shave significant amount from the price. But what I believe is that the volumes we have are too artificial. Because at the point we're doing 43 million barrels per day, at the point we went up to 60 million barrels per day, 70 million barrels per day, I mean, where exactly do we stand? There should be a predictable pattern in all of these things. And the only way is to remove the incentive of corruption out of it, so that people just, what exactly the country needs is what gets imported. And maybe when Dangote refinery comes on stream, the Nigerian government might make a strategic decision, maybe to sell crude in naira to him, or maybe to give him at a discounted rate. That will also have some fiscal and monetary implications, definitely. Because don't forget that it's not like you see we are increasing production significantly. It is still out of the production that we are gearing for export right now that we're still going to give to Mr. Dangote to fuel his refinery. So all of that will come into play as we go along the way. The fundamental part of this is Nigeria has chosen not to leave oil. But somehow our underinvestment in the sector over the years means that oil is leaving Nigeria. 2 million barrels per day. If you discount that for even NNPC swaps and Dangote's needs, maybe somewhere around 1 million or 1.2 million is not enough to meet Nigeria's fiscal balance. So at this point, we need to just explore other options. Taxes, we need to explore other options and create new productive engines that can really support government fiscal sheets. And those are the questions that Nigeria will have to resolve in the long term, because to continuously look at this extractive sector and think it look at oil and the perception of oil within the global market, and how several international organizations are deliberately defunding the investment in the oil sector. And we also understand that we might have stranded assets in the ground in the long run.
Let's talk about trust issues now as we wrap up this segment of the show. Nigerians would, according to the figures we have, we expect 6 to 7 trillion saved if a subsidy is taken out outrightly. But many will now ask that how sure are you that government will focus and direct this funds to developmental projects? How do we evaluate? How do we assess and understand that truly the positives of subsidy removal outweighs the negative?
You made a strong point there, Tolu, and I think that's before you go, the kitchen and the head problem, and I think Nigerians must just live up to their responsibility. I made the same argument 2012, 11 years ago, that the government of the day wasn't sensitive, and they were not going to be accountable for the gains and the benefits of subsidy. But you can make that argument when you even felt that we had the fiscal space to handle it. I don't think we have the fiscal space to handle it anymore. We don't have the revenues to continue to do this. So it's not sensible. I mean, how can you be borrowing for subsidy? And that was confirmed by the Minister of Finance. We took Euro bonds for consumption. we're taking $800 million for consumption. What is the logical sense in that? It doesn't make sense in any way. What we are supposed to, the government of the day, and I think the new government that will come on board, well, as of today, we will have to be realistic that the president-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when he comes on board, maybe becomes president, because we will likely not even have a Supreme Court resolution of things. And so we still have to deal with the fact that he would be president by May 29. If at that point he comes on board, it is going to be left to him. And he has also been big on the fact that he wants to remove subsidy. I think maybe the current administration might remove it before he leaves, before when it comes on stream. But if he's the one to remove subsidy, he has an opportunity to reset trust in Nigeria in how he handles his government. If he handles his government in an opulent, in an abusive way of public resources, where he's driving and the ordinary hate to the minister is driving or to the president is driving and it's on a 610 can convoy. If that is the kind of approach, if contracts are flying over everywhere in over-invoiced sums, if that's the approach, if it's all about people going and traveling out of the country with plenty of entourages and paying themselves fat and money, if that's the approach, it will not be able to build trust. But if Nigeria see from your perception and from your approach that we are all in this together and we are all taking this bullet together, we're all taking this pain together, and you trying to engender measures of transparency and accountability in how you manage public resources, then people will be, we warm up more, to your whatever ideas or you're trying to tell them. Because I think not every Nigerian, but most Nigerians who are opinion leaders have come round circle to the fact, and I think these are across different partisan lines, that subsidy issue has to be dealt with once and for all, and it needs to go at this point. But I feel it's a perception of the government in terms of speech, in terms of approach, in terms of spending, in terms of how you also support organizations and institutions driving accountability and transparency, NEITI, the budget office, the Auditor General, how those organizations are supported to engender accountability. We also define how Nigerians perceive it. But if it's just about the same old, spend and spend and spend without any level of restraint and caution, then
Seun, do we have you back? Well, Seun Onigbinde there, making real sense. All right, Seun, let's wrap up now with other forms of palliatives that you think. Many have talked about the 5,000 naira. We've talked about that handout. Some are talking about gas to power. We'll start to reduce the usage of PMS, yes, so that we focus on other forms of gas or energy, any other energy sources. What other sorts of palliatives do you think government needs to think about? Maybe short term, medium term, and long term?
Short term, like I said, is look at food and look at public transport systems. Because the thing about inflationary effect of increasing fuel price is that, to me, it's very emotional. It's a cost-push inflation. So everybody feels that everything is rising and everybody has to jack up its prices. Like the same way people look at, even people who have no business with exporting or importing goods. Yeah, they take the general pulse of the economy and also apply inflationary effects to their goods. So I suspect that will be the situation. Immediately, bus drivers, taxi drivers increase their transport fare. That will have significant impact, on almost every cost of good. So what I would say is, at least, what are the basics of an average Nigerian? Food, transport, energy. And so those are three elements of where you think of average Nigeria. So if I was going to describe anything, one is, how do you bring down the cost of food? Food inflation in Nigeria is as high as 22%. How do you bring down? And how do you palliatives? Because Nigerians' issues require a high level of thinking. What are you going to do to make sure that the cost of food comes down so that more people in Nigeria can have access to food in a cheaper way? So that's number one. Two is transport systems. How do you build efficient public transport systems? Not the ones you dash to road unions, or you just give to your own cronies and you think they can run them. The ones that's truly about serving the people at a cheaper way and a cheaper price. So that's something. Everybody knows that the bus system or the transport system in most developed societies are heavily subsidized. So that's something we can do. The third thing I think we should also do is to look at energy. So if for rural communities, for suburban communities, this might also be time to provide maybe an extra subsidy for them, to be able to counter the effect of having access. This might be the time for us to accelerate access to renewable energy, microgrids, micro solar energy, LPG, liquefied gas, and make sure that more people have access to things like that. That is how I feel for energy, food, and transport. Then we can have medium-term solutions like having a national register, so that people who are really truly poor can be captured in a national social safety net and get much more opportunity. In the long term of all of this is that in Nigeria has to be a productive economy. People have to be put to work, and they have to be assets that pay taxes into the country. And gradually, that's why we're able to turn the wheel of the country in a country that where public leaders are there to truly serve the people.
Mr. Seun Onigbinde, I must thank you so much. Co-founder, Chief Executive Officer, Project Nigeria. Thank you so much. I made sure we're able to get you to react to this very important topic of discourse. And of course, your contribution is highly appreciated.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have a wonderful day. Thank you.
All right, you too.